The science fiction story begins by depicting a time when several scientists working in a private organization were engaged in a project. Their main goal was to create beings that were not exactly human beings with human-like emotions but with minds and healing factors far superior to ordinary humans. The scientists were continuously conducting experiments, but these tasks were not going to be easy. Therefore, they decided to use a hybrid structure. This entire structure required changes at the DNA and molecular levels. First, the scientists collected human DNA and integrated numerous animal hybrid structures into it. This included everything from intelligence to the strength that the body would provide. Along with this, they had the advantage of using nanotechnology in their entire system. The scientists even modified the nervous cells and nervous system, which was an extremely critical and dangerous task. After several months of effort, they managed to create a small test subject. However, initially, its condition deteriorated to the point where it became extremely difficult to control. Although the scientists tried to keep it alive, due to some issues in their manipulation and creation process, it eventually died. After several more months of work, when they created a second test subject, its body was functioning properly, but it developed some unusual wiring problems in its head. As a result, this test subject also perished. Despite these setbacks, the scientists at the private company did not give up. They continued to learn from their mistakes and thus managed to create a third subject. The most shocking thing was that this third subject was created perfectly. It had no defects or disabilities and appeared to be a complete human child. However, they all knew the reality. This was not a human but a hybrid child with human qualities and several other powers. In simple terms, this meant that as the test subject grew, its behavior and thinking would be entirely human-like because it included human DNA. However, this test subject's mind would be much faster than that of a normal human, and its abilities to fight diseases would far surpass those of ordinary humans. In fact, its healing factor could even surpass Wolverine's. For now, the scientists who had worked so hard for years were very pleased. They lovingly named their test subject Morgan, and their only task now was to raise Morgan well so that it could make significant contributions to human civilization and help them. Little did they know that their creation would eventually become a burden to them. But for now, the scientists were very happy with their creation. They gradually started raising Morgan. Morgan's growth was much faster than that of other children, and it didn't seem like Morgan was not a human. The entire group of scientists treated Morgan very well. They ensured that Morgan never felt like it was not human. It seemed as if Morgan was one of their own children, and they took excellent care of it. Among them, Dr. Amy, a scientist, was particularly close to Morgan. She always treated Morgan well and took care of her. One day, as usual, Amy took Morgan to the forest for a walk. Morgan had a set limit. She could not venture outside this forest area because she was not used to being among normal people. As they walked further, Morgan spotted a deer lying on the ground, severely injured. A hunter had attacked it, causing it to flee and seek refuge here. Without hesitation, Morgan immediately went to the injured deer and started to touch it. It seemed as if she could feel the pain of the deer. But in the next moment, Morgan grabbed the injured deer by the throat. She broke its neck, instantly killing it. Amy was shocked because Morgan was not programmed with any commands to kill or harm anyone. Since such commands were not included in her programming, why did Morgan do this? Amy immediately reported the incident to all the senior scientists and the entire team. They were all very tense and began to recheck their programs. The scientists realized that they needed to take some drastic actions with Morgan, as she could potentially kill anyone. In the private company they worked for, they were required to report to senior members, so due to Morgan's changing behavior, she was moved to another room. Morgan was only 5 years old, but her physical growth was rapid because she was entirely different from humans. Her entire nervous system was built with a hybrid structure. However, Morgan was very uncomfortable being in this small room because she had previously spent a lot of time in an open space where she could do anything she wanted. When the scientists and Amy questioned Morgan, she expressed her discomfort and stated that she wanted to be free and live in an open space. The team of scientists was at a loss as to how to allow Morgan to roam freely given her changing behavior, as she could become a threat to anyone. To clarify the situation, an investigator was sent into the chamber to talk to Morgan. Initially, Morgan spoke normally, but she was extremely frustrated being confined to the small room and wanted to get out at any cost. She attacked the investigator, causing severe damage. The officer sustained a deep injury to the eye, necessitating a transfer to the hospital. From these events, it became clear to the scientists that Morgan had become dangerous. But the team could not perform these actions against Morgan in such a manner because, although Morgan was not human, the entire team of scientists had raised her as their own daughter. They had performed all the tasks like parents. Therefore, one of the scientists, named John, could not bear to see Morgan this way. However, John was seen discussing with another officer, stating that their project was heading in the right direction. This meant that some decisions made by John and his team were aligned with Morgan's behavior, and they were moving in the right direction according to their assessments. When the headquarters learned about Morgan's aggressive behavior, the head members of the private company sent an officer, Dr. Lin, for a deep investigation. Dr. Lin was a high-level officer who had resolved many illegal cases related to the company. She thoroughly discussed the matters and made decisions based on her investigations. Now, Dr. Lin was responsible for overseeing Morgan and determining if she posed any threat to humans. If there was even a slight chance that Morgan could endanger humans, she would be completely eliminated. This was the final decision of the head members of the private company. Dr. Lin began a thorough investigation into the scientists who had created Morgan. She soon discovered that these scientists had become very close to Morgan, considering her as a family member and hiding all her faults. Dr. Lin was displeased with this. Keeping an emotional connection with Morgan was highly inappropriate. Lin even went to the officer whose eye was injured by Morgan. During the interrogation, the officer simply stated that Morgan was not at fault, rather, it was the officer who had provoked Morgan. Dr. Lin realized that these people were determined to protect Morgan at any cost, whether or not she was at fault. This infuriated Lin. Dr. Lin then deepened her investigation into the case. To further explore these issues, the managers of the private company sent a psychologist named Dr. Allen to assess Morgan's mental state. Dr. Allen was required to submit a detailed report to his senior managers on whether Morgan was stable or not. The other scientists were informed about Dr. Allen's arrival and his intention to speak with Morgan. John and the other officers advised Dr. Allen to speak to Morgan from behind a mirror for safety reasons. However, Dr. Allen chose not to follow this advice and decided to enter the chamber for the investigation. Once granted permission by the senior officers, it was difficult to stop Dr. Allen, so he entered the chamber despite the warnings and began asking Morgan a series of questions. Dr. Allen asked various psychological questions, and Morgan responded calmly to all of them. She even apologized for her previous behavior and admitted that what she did to the officer was wrong. Morgan promised that such behavior would not happen again, that she was working on improving herself, and that this would be resolved soon. However, Dr. Allen, a highly experienced psychologist, knew how to trigger a response in individuals and did not expect such normal replies from Morgan. Therefore, he started asking increasingly provocative questions, designed to provoke anger even in a normal person. These questions began to genuinely anger Morgan. Dr. Allen even went as far as to say that if Morgan could not prove herself, her creators would burn her alive, implying that her existence could be terminated. These statements were gradually infuriating Morgan, and she started to cry. Dr. Allen's goal was to provoke Morgan into revealing her true nature. In the next moment, Morgan suddenly lunged at Dr. Allen, attacking him and attempting to bite his neck. She nearly killed Dr. Allen in her attack. For now, Dr. Allen was unconscious. Seeing Morgan in this state, Amy, John, and the other scientists who had created her were extremely frightened. When Lin and her senior officers were informed about the situation, Lin immediately issued a command to kill Morgan on the spot. She deemed Morgan a failed experiment and a potential threat to humans. Morgan was placed on a stretcher and completely restrained, while the scientists were preparing to carry out the procedure to eliminate her. None of the scientists wanted to kill Morgan, as she was like their own daughter. However, they were bound by the orders from the private company they worked for. Suddenly, Dr. Darren, one of the scientists, stood in opposition. He told Lin clearly that he would not allow Morgan to be killed, as she was like his daughter, and he would protect her. This led to a heated argument between Dr. Darren and Lin, with both of them even engaging in physical combat. During this fight, all the scientists united and managed to restrain Lin, locking her inside the same chamber where Morgan was kept. The scientists came together, and none of them wanted to harm Morgan. Amy and the other members decided to escape with Morgan and keep her safe, taking on the responsibility of her protection. They planned to take her to a secure place where they could care for her. Morgan began to scream loudly, pleading to be let go and to live her own life. Seeing her in such agony, Dr. Darren freed Morgan and tried to revive her. However, as soon as Morgan opened her eyes, she started attacking Dr. Darren. She inflicted severe damage on him, killing him in the process. Morgan then began attacking the very creators and scientists who had always cared for her. Morgan was attacking one scientist with a poison syringe, killing him in the process. The questions Dr. Allen had asked Morgan had deeply hurt her emotions. Although Morgan was not entirely human, she still had some emotions, which were severely damaged by the interrogation. Now, Morgan no longer considered anyone her friend and started killing everyone who came in her way. She even shot Dr. John and the senior members, effectively eliminating the very scientists who had treated her like a daughter. Morgan's form was the most dangerous, devoid of any emotion or compassion. However, she spared Amy, as she considered Amy her closest companion and the person with whom she had spent her childhood. Amy was the team member who had spent the most time with Morgan, which is why Morgan did not harm her. Instead, she handed Amy a gun and touched her lovingly, as if considering her a mother. When Amy realized that all her colleagues had been killed, she was in shock and didn't know what to do. Morgan, now fully free, asked Amy to take her to the lake nearby, as she wanted to enjoy her freedom there. Amy had promised Morgan that if she ever reached her limits, she would take her to the lake. This was why Morgan repeatedly insisted on going to the lake with Amy. Amy, overwhelmed and crying in her car, was unsure of how to handle the situation. She knew that opposing Morgan could result in her own death, just as it had for the other members. For now, Amy drove with Morgan towards the lake. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Lynn regained consciousness, managed to free herself, and set out with a companion to eliminate Morgan. Lynn had received orders from her senior officers to terminate Morgan as quickly as possible because she was considered a field experiment posing a threat to humans. The more time Morgan had, the more she would grow and her powers could increase significantly. Therefore, for Lynn, it was the best time to kill Morgan. She quickly reached the forest with her companion and used a tracker implanted in Morgan's body by the company to locate her. They followed Morgan's location and arrived at the lake. Morgan was extremely angry and launched a fierce attack on Lynn. Although Dr. Lynn was very agile, Morgan was not human. She was a hybrid structure created from nanomaterials, possessing human abilities and much more. No ordinary person could withstand such a confrontation. Despite using her fighting skills, Lynn could only survive for a while. Morgan attacked her with such ferocity that a hidden dagger was thrust into Lynn's back. Lynn was in great pain and bleeding profusely. Morgan realized Lynn would not survive and decided to leave with her mother, Amy. However, it turned out that Lynn was not dead yet, she had only been slightly injured. Lynn returned from behind and started attacking Morgan, not giving her a chance to retaliate. Dr. Lynn managed to drag Morgan into the water, knowing Morgan's weakness in water, a fact the company's head members had revealed during their research. This strategy proved correct as Morgan was struggling to fight effectively in the water. Lynn held Morgan tightly and began to drown her. Amy watched from a distance, unsure of what to do. Eventually, Lynn drowned Morgan, completing her mission. However, one thing was noticeable: Lynn's face showed no significant expression. Why was that? We'll find out the reason in a bit, but after killing Morgan, Lynn quickly surfaced and pointed her gun at Amy. She had received orders from senior officers to eliminate all officers and scientists involved in this project to ensure that no one would learn about it. Therefore, Dr. Lynn took out her gun and shot Amy immediately. She also killed her companion who had come to help her. The reason was clear: the head members did not want the government to discover their illegal project. The government had imposed restrictions on human experimentation, but this private company was secretly following procedures and creating hybrid humans. This revealed a dark reality: Lynn was not a normal human but a hybrid human like Morgan, with performance far surpassing Morgan's. Lynn had mastered her emotions and carried out all tasks as directed by her senior officers. It seemed that the private company's decision was final: they would create more hybrid humans like Lynn, devoid of emotions, who would follow orders without question. However, the head members had forced the scientists to develop hybrids like Morgan, who had human-like emotions, as part of their experimentation. They wanted to confirm which version, Morgan or Lynn, was the best hybrid human. They had already seen the drawbacks of Morgan, who had emotions and preferred freedom, leading to aggressive behavior and violence. On the other hand, Lynn, who had been created to be more controlled and emotionless, seemed to be the more successful prototype. She had no emotions. Lynn followed every task given to her and completed it no matter what. The senior officers needed robots like Lynn who would execute orders without question. Therefore, they decided to permanently shut down the Morgan project and create an army of hybrid humans like Lynn. This army would be used for deep research, and no one would recognize this illegal project because the hybrid humans did not appear to be robots. The head members could thus advance their project without fear, and with this dangerous ending, our story concludes here.